we are. Hello, and welcome to the Indie Bandits podcast or stream if you're joining us live on Twitch, or I guess YouTube video if you're joining us from the future and watching this back. Hello, and welcome to everyone. We're back after a short break, and if you're watching us live on video, you'll see Jimmy's alive and well. Just you can't see now, and we're not going to show you, but he's without tonsils. He will be talking this evening, but we're going to cut him some slack. He had some compassionate leave for his recovery, but he's still here to provide us with some marketing wisdom. If you don't remember, he's a content marketer with a decade of experience, so he's our resident marketer, and I myself am a translator and copywriter with a background in marketing, which is why we feel, at least in some way, worthy of discussing marketing with you, lovely indie devs. So this is the fourth session, if I'm not mistaken. We've had a look at our report. We've had a look at purchase funnels, and the indie game marketing starter kit, which is what we were discussing last time, which was all the things that you should need to start marketing your indie game. So today we're going to look at content creation, and content schedule, and we're going to apply that all to the funnel we've already mentioned and the things that you should have if you've been paying attention. If you haven't, then we'll give you some tips. Don't worry. Or if you haven't caught a previous incidence of this, then we can we will explain some of these things, but we'll not go too much into it because there are entire episodes on that. So, firstly, Jim, are you all right? You're good to speak. For the nodding's not going to help for audio listeners, but I think you can talk. Yeah, but you let me know. I've not probably much use for you, but I've got some beer to keep my throat nice and healthy.
Yeah, no, I should be okay. Should be okay for this evening, but we'll see.
We'll see. If you start getting croaky, then we'll obviously cut you some slack. So, in previous episodes, we were talking about the funnel and the idea that a customer goes on a journey from not knowing anything about your product, in this instance, your indie game, and they gain familiarity with the product, and eventually the product seems like a good idea to buy, and they purchase it if you've done your marketing correctly. At various stages throughout this funnel, they will interact with the product or the marketing messaging that you should be putting out through one of the many things we said you should have in the previous episode, things like social media, your website, emailers, and not so much for indie games, but traditional marketing things like billboards and adverts and spots like that. These are all part of this, but for digital distribution, they don't apply too much to independent game developers. So if we start at the top of the funnel where no one knows anything about your game, I've now chime in as I'm going through this, Jimmy. But to me, the top of funnel content needs to be quite generic and wide reaching because it's, for one, a lot of people. It's the broadest net you'll be casting because it's to everyone. Now, little asterisk here. It won't be to everyone if you've got a lot of marketing research behind you, but in the first instance, before you have any research or any knowledge about the kind of people who will be interested in your product, this is theoretically a wide net to get as many people into the funnel as possible, though some and many will probably fall out.
Yeah, I mean, you're still going to want to target that content. Obviously, not every single person's going to be a potential purchaser of the game. You've got to figure out who's into your type of game. That might still be a fairly broad audience of people, but you still need to figure out who they are. But this top of funnel content is typically things like, social media, like blogs, things like that, daily vlogs, that sort of stuff. That's kind of the top of funnel content. The stuff that's basically just content about your game, or if you're doing like a building in public type thing, the stuff that you're up to on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. Nothing too certainly nothing too salesy at that point.
No, and you're not, and at this point you're not usually even discussing the idea of selling the product. I mean, you are, but not directly,
No,
if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah, you're just showing it off, aren't you? You're trying to look at this screenshot. Look at, we've just written a blog about how this feature works, or um, this is what we've been up to this week. There's a 5 minute, weekly vlog of what the team's been up to, that sort of stuff. It's all designed to keep your game, well, to build awareness first of all, but then also to just keep your game front of mind
Yeah.
with people, and ensure that it's an active project as well. Because sure, we've all looked at games in the past and gotten really intrigued by a game, and then the team's gone completely quiet for weeks and weeks and weeks, and you begin to wonder if they're even still using the game, and you might just completely forget about it. So that's what this top of funnel stuff is designed to do. It's build a bit of awareness, let people know who you are, what you're doing, and keep what you're doing, what you're building front of mind.
Yeah, I mean, anyone, if you're doing it right, there should be no chance of them forgetting that this game exists. I think that's one of the big problems that we see with a lot of the indie dev marketing going around. You have, a huge burst of content as people are excited about what they're doing or they have things to show off. And then, especially when they're building in public, when they get to a moment where perhaps it's not as interesting to share or talk about, a lot, when it comes to doing things like, polishing or even just like the less exciting aspects of the game, when they're working on that, then their marketing stops, and your marketing shouldn't really take a dip at any point. Like that is the one thing that has to be constant, even if even if the project is, taking a lull, or even if production is slowed, or even if something else, other things are going on, or it's not as flashy, that content still has to be as regular as you can manage, because otherwise people will forget. And then when you come back with some interesting content, they may not care about your game anymore, or money is finite. They may have bought another game, or they may have made a purchase decision for a different game that satisfies a similar number of needs that your game could have, and then they may not even be in that. That's them falling out the funnel. They've went elsewhere. They've got a product that meets the needs they had.
Yeah. I also, the other day I was having a chat with somebody, and they came up with a sentence. So I was like, fantastic, really. Repetition influences perception, and familiar things are perceived as superior.
Mm.
If you just go off that, have that as a marketing principle, and pin it up on your wall in your office or at home, wherever you're building your game, and just stick to that. If that, even that one principle more than anything else, that will help guide your content marketing, and how often you should, and why you should be consistently putting messages out there.
Well, with consistency and consistent messaging, one of the tools that we mentioned in the starter kit was social media, and it's all, social media is free, and you know again, another little asterisk on the side of it. It can be powerful, but remember that social media isn't really working for you, it's working for itself. Social media exists for its own engagement, not to necessarily promote your product. So don't be surprised if one tweet doesn't instantly set the internet ablaze with people talking about your game, or one post on Facebook. This is why it needs to be consistent and almost unrelenting, because the algorithms that drive these platforms love regular content, because you're almost working for them at this point. They live off content, and if you're providing that, they are happy to show it to more people, especially if it's getting engagement. So if you regularly post and regularly get engagement, then these algorithms want to show this information, this content, to more people, because it's been proven to be worthwhile sharing with people because of the engagement behind it.
Yeah, but always remember that there is an algorithm between you and your audience on these platforms. There always
Yeah.
is, and there always will be. So just bear that in mind. It can work with you, and it can just as easily, 1 month to the next, work against you. So social media is a fantastic platform, depending on whichever one you use, I guess. Um, it's free. It should be used as much as possible, but I wouldn't rely on it to be a tool that's going to potentially make your game into a huge success. Obviously, we can have a discussion about paid social, which cuts through a bit more of the noise and eliminates the issue of the algorithm. But if we're just talking now about top of funnel content, having a social media channel, just be aware that from 1 month to the next, what content worked 1 month might not work the next month, and it's a constantly evolving process. But it's one that everybody should be using to get more awareness of who they are and what it is they're building out there.
Well, I mean, your social should exist to get people along the funnel. Like people should hear
Mhm.
about your game on the social. On the social, I sound like an old person, don't I? On the Facebook.
Yeah.
They should hear about your game. You know, I mean, social media is one of the quickest ways to get a free message out to some people, and specifically choose the word "some" here because these platforms don't even show your content to all the people who follow you. You know, there are things that play here that under the hood, like you said, Jimmy, the algorithm may work for you one day and not for the next. So when you have eyes on your content, make sure that content's taking them somewhere where you are in more control of what they see. Like
Yeah.
your website, stuff you own and host, like your mailing list. You want those people who showed an interest to act upon that interest, and then don't want to say like, and then you've got them, like you're abducting them or something like that. But you have them engaged. They're listen. You have them in a place where you can choose when and how you message them, rather than this, you know, the big bad algorithm, as it were.
The only thing, the only thing I would say there is just there is an element of like playing the game if you are going to be doing free social media. That if you post links in your content, those posts tend to get no help from the algorithm because the algorithms want to keep you on their platform. So yes, definitely the occasional one, put that out there and have a link to the website, find out more about us, click here, etc. Have all that stuff in your profile as well.
Yeah.
Um, but I would put the vast majority of the content that you're putting out on social as to live on social and keep people on the
Hmm.
social media platform that you're on because um yeah, linked out content is statistically very poorly, it performs very poorly because Facebook doesn't want to direct someone away from Facebook, and
No.
neither does Twitter, neither does Instagram. So keep people on the platform for the most part. Make sure your profile is absolutely spot on with all the links going to the right places. Because if someone clicks on a screenshot and really enjoys the look of the game and wants to find out more, the first place they're going to go is they're going to go to your profile on that platform. Then they're going to go from there to your website, probably. So I wouldn't worry too much about making sure every single social media post has a link out to your website or anything. Um,
No, they don't need
unless,
to
of
be
course, you're
links,
paying
but
for it,
yeah.
in which case then you can link anywhere because they don't care at that point.
No, because they've got money instead of people on the platform, and
Yeah,
that's why they have people on the platform, to make money. So once they're making money off you paying them to go somewhere else, obviously, but you could that doesn't mean you can't have good calls to action without links. You can tell people to do things
yeah.
without having an actual link. So even if
Check out our
outbound links,
profile.
yeah, visit the profile.
To learn
Even
more.
simple things telling people to look for X game. People,
Mhm.
they mightn't click a link, but I can imagine that most people, if they know how to buy a game via a digital distribution platform, they'll know how to search for games. They'll know how to use Google. As long as you haven't made one of the biggest, and well, I don't really call it, one of the worst mistakes that I've seen devs make is picking a name for their game and sticking for it without ever having thought, God, I'm only on my first beer, without ever having thought of how this will work for SEO in Google. Like,
Hmm.
there are times when I'm looking for an indie game that I've seen, and I try and search. I'm like, oh my god, this was potentially the worst. They didn't check if this existed before. Like, even when you put name of game plus game, or name of game plus Steam, and you're like, God, how is this not like on the first page? Because they picked something like either that, I don't know, they thought it sounded cool but never thought of checking that someone else hadn't done it.
Yeah.
Which is such a shame.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. Take a minute or two to double check that. Even if you don't change the name of the game, you change
The name of your
I
studio or
guess
something, have it
the
just.
domain or something. Yeah, domain studio. You could have an overriding studio on top. Yeah, something. Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so you have social, you have all of this like regular content. What I did want to add is that one of the things that I hear a lot is that they don't have time for socials. I mean, I don't have time is like the number one excuse from devs when they're not marketing enough, and I get it. Like they
Bad
are
excuses.
they are super busy, but if you don't
They are,
have
but
time, work
it's just one
smarter.
of those things. Yeah, but
Be-
like, if you're saying you've got no time, then you have to make time. There's no shortcut. There's no workaround. If you don't have if you're the only one doing the game and you want to sell the game and you don't have time to market your game, then you're doing something wrong in your schedule. Like, make time for it. Do a little bit less of something else that week and make time for your marketing. You have to do it. Coming out with the "I don't have any time" excuse is a very frequent one in a lot of industries, not just indie game development. And it's a very poor excuse, because if it's important enough, you should be making time for it.
yeah, and it's kind of it's the catch-22 situation as well, because they'll argue, oh yeah, but then if I don't make a good game, no one will buy it. It's like, you could make the best game in the world, but if you don't market it, no one will buy it. Everything that's game of the year has been like marketed to hell. Like, you've not been able to avoid these games. AAA. Um, I might be pulling a figure out my arse here, but I'm fairly certain that I heard that some of the larger studios are literally like 50-50 development marketing in terms of budget. I might be making that up,
Mm.
but it was whatever number would shock you. It was that. I just remember reading and going, yeah, they market, they spend as much on marketing as they do making the game, and then they make their money back tenfold. Well, probably more than God knows how. The numbers AAA studios
Yeah.
make are absolutely stupid, but you can make time for it, and even if you're short on time, then you've got to make sure you're using the time more effectively. And this is where like schedule is hugely important. You need to schedule when you're going to make the content, for not just for social but for everything. But social as an example, when you're going to make the content for social, when you're going to post the content for social, and then between those two, work out when you can make the content and work out when you can post it, because you don't have to be there to post it. You know, it's different between engaging with people on social. That's I'm talking about just general top of funnel awareness content. Those you can schedule, those you can automate, those you can use tools so that when you've got the time to create the content, then you can have machines do it. Like, you don't have to sit there every time your Twitter's tweeting about your game, or you're posting about your game on the Facebook page for the game. You can schedule these, set them up, work out how much content you've got to share, and then work out for how long you're going to be sharing it. And then you can schedule all that. You spend some time, like first day of the week, schedule all the content for the following week. Sit down for however long it takes you to make a week's worth of content about your game to raise awareness for it. Same with the posts, same with the you know vlogs, whatever. You can if you work more effectively doing it in bulk, you can do it in bulk and then drip feed it out over a longer period of time, especially to cover those quieter periods where you mightn't have something to share.
Yeah, and also I imagine that a lot of people are saying, I don't have time to do the marketing because I'm developing the game. But like, what's then figure out what the outcomes of that are then? If you're doing this for yourself, have you set yourself a hard deadline for when that game's coming out? If you have, you've probably hamstrung yourself. If you haven't, then okay, the game might take an extra month or two to come out. Is that the worst thing in the world if you've then also spent all of that time properly marketing that game? Like, I would argue the game coming out 2 months earlier and no one's ever heard of it is probably not better than the game coming out 2 months later and you've built up a nice group of fans online who have been following your progress and engaging with your social media and your marketing and have subscribed to your email list. And I know which situation I'd rather be in. I'd rather be the guy who brings his game out 2 months later than he thought he would, just because I actually had time to put some marketing together.
And also, if you're marketing right during those during X delay, it's just more time to market it. It's like, if you'd been super strict on a date that it was coming out and you're going to miss that, then you've got 2 extra months of content. You can keep updating people saying, look, it's not out yet, but I want it to be good. And, you know, they don't have to know it's late because you decided to market it a bit more. Like, you can
Yeah,
you can you can build in public, and you don't have to tell them everything.
you don't need to tell them when it's coming out if you're building this. If you've got in your mind, like, okay, by December, I want this game to be out, and then it gets to November, and you're like, oh man, it's going to be February, then it doesn't matter if nobody else knows.
Yeah.
They just think you're building a game, and they're waiting for you to tell them when it's going to be available. So just crack on and make sure, and take a 2 or 3 hours every week out of your development schedule to add in marketing on social media, and use that time, as you've said, to use scheduling tools to put together a bunch of like cool stuff that you've done in that last week to promote the following week,
Yeah, you
and
should.
just do that every single week.
I mean, the thing is, like, if you have one week where you've ended up like, getting a lot of like share worthy additions done to the game, and you've got loads of screens and loads of cool stuff to share. You don't have to dump that all on Monday and then have nothing for 4 weeks whilst you like work on menus. If you've got loads of stuff, great. Like, treat people to a little extra than you normally would, but you can always keep it aside with these scheduling tools. You can go, God, I've got hundreds of cool screens to share. I can have you could have those going out for an entire month, especially if you know that the next bit of the game you're working on is going to be quiet and not generate much content. You can hold it back because you know dumping all this like excellent content on one day is not going to make the game more memorable than repeated messaging. Like, that's how human brains work. Like, we need to be reminded constantly of things. We need to be reminded less constantly of things once we've got a familiarity with them. But obviously, stuff for awareness, that's why it needs to be constant, because people aren't familiar with the product, and in this instance the game.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. And
Which
just essentially, there's no excuse to not do this stage of the content funnel. There's absolutely no excuse, is there, really, for not doing it? Social media is free. Putting together a tweet takes a matter of seconds, especially if you've got tons of cool stuff. Like, I feel like game developers are just, they're basically creating never-ending cool content by just doing the work. So this is a point at which like this should be a no-brainer for everybody. Get on the different platforms that work for your audience and become a frequent publisher of content on those platforms.
Yeah, and people will start engaging with them, and And then there's also the kind of like psychological aspect that the more someone's engaged with something, these are like our touch points. The more they've engaged with it, the more they feel part of the product. Like
Hmm.
people have a, well, even if you want to sound like you're really cool and you don't care about brands and stuff like that, the more you've engaged with a certain brand or product, you naturally feel that because you've invested time in it, it is a bigger part of you. And someone
Yeah.
will feel a greater affinity for something they see all the time. They'll even feel, they'll even start to feel like they know the devs. You know, they may have never spoken to you, but they'll have seen this and go, "Oh yeah, and he was making this, and he was making this, and he's added this to it, and then this is happening." The more you've engaged, then when it comes time to move them along, this regular content is way more effective at generating that feeling of belonging, especially to community, than one-off posts every month.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, should we move on to something non-social, because I mean social, as good as it is for awareness, I don't think this is where it's not for me. It's not where the action happens, and but the problem is, I think a lot of indie devs think it is, and we've mentioned this on, I think, on the funnel episode and the marketing starter kit episode, that look, you can't just go straight from here. You've just found out about my game. Now go to the storefront and buy it. Like that will work for a very limited number of people. There are some people who are like impulse buyers, and there are those kinds of consumers out there who'll see something cool and go, "Bam, that looks amazing. $20, euros, or pounds, or whatever currency you use," and just buy the game immediately. Most consumers won't. Most consumers will find out about it. Then they'll need to be constantly reminded of it for a bit. And then eventually it'll just make sense to them to buy it, because they'll have been shown everything they need to remove any doubts, that's stopping them from buying it. And then once you've removed all doubt and they can see that it's a product that they should buy, only then will they buy it. So social's great for awareness and also great for engaging with the community when they do engage, but at top of funnel, then you've got to really be thinking about these the awareness messaging. The and we've said this before. The website, we said you should have a website. I think there's a lot of devs that think you just need a storefront front page, and we did discuss this last time, that you only need a storefront page and some socials. And again, it might work for like the impulse buyers, but you need somewhere where you control the messaging, where you can control how people engage with your product, because Steam's all well and good, itch is all well and good, but you don't own that. That's not yours. And we've talked about building on rented land. The website belongs to you. You control the messaging. You can control the content that goes on there, and you know that when people are on there and you put content on it, they will see it. There are no algorithms in the way stopping people who visit your website from seeing the content when and how you want them to see it.
Yeah, it's such an important part of it. As you said, we went through it in a previous episode, and it's one of those sort of there is no argument against type of thing. You need a website, you need somewhere for people to go to find out more about your game, for you, as you said, to control the message and to push them further down funnel as well. Sign up for emails, wish listing games, etc., etc. That's your flag in the ground on the internet, as it were.
And as for the content on the website, obviously it's yours, so you get way more control over what the content is. But from a consumer perspective, I would say you need to immediately show off the game in the best light. Obviously, your landing page, homepage, whatever you want to call it, that immediately needs to double down on the messaging that got the person there. There's no point
Hmm.
in there's no point in sending messaging out on social about this, that, and the other about your game, and then have someone land on your homepage and there be nothing about that. It's the you know
Yeah,
it's one of the quickest way to have someone bounce off the website, just to have them arrive and be disappointed. if you're controlling the messaging and you have picked out, which you should have, some like like the elevator pitch, if you want to call it that, the key the key selling points for your game to draw people in on socials, when they land on your website, that has to be like the first things they're shown, but on crack. If you've said it's if it's a fighting game and there's like exciting action, and you've drawn them in with exciting action, the last thing you want is to have someone land and just have like a moody looking like main character and none of the action you've promised them. Like that kind of dissonance is what makes people go, nah, I can't be bothered with this. But if they're excited for the action you've promised and then you deliver that in some and then some, excellent. So your landing page has to line up with the messaging you're putting out. And if you change the messaging, you're going to have to change the website. Like non-updated websites are out of date websites. Like you don't even need. You're making a game. You should have enough skills to put together, especially this day and age, a decent website or web page. And I'm not saying you have to be a web designer. There are tools out there. Like anyone can make a website nowadays. I mean, you'll see an advert for them in the end of every ruddy YouTube video. There'll be some platform blogging how to make a website really easy, and you can do that. And especially with like the way you can embed content now, you don't even have to know that much. You can just if you have a cool trailer that shows up everything you've been promising, it can be front row center.
Yeah, and making sure you have all of the main parts of a website. Well, have your blog somewhere where your content lives. Have plenty of sign up calls to actions for to sign up to your email or to wishlist your game, links out to your storefronts, an about section as well. I think it's always a really good idea to humanize the product in a way by showing the people behind the product. I don't think that ever harms anybody. So I think it's always good when you can see an about section where you can learn a little bit more about the team, or if it's just yourself, a little bit more about you. Obviously, a contact section. You need to hit all the main pages and just make sure that it's very easy for someone who lands on your website to find out more about your game, see the game in action in some way. There's a video, playable demo, some more screenshots, whatever that might be, and then find out more about the people behind the game as well, and ways for them to sign up to engage more with you. I think if you can come up with a little checklist for what should be on your website, as long as you hit those major points, you'll have pretty much everything covered. And it does not take a huge amount of effort or money to be able to put together a website that'll look good and hits all those things.
Yeah, I mean, and the good thing is like if your game has art, it already has like a visual identity. Like the aesthetics of the website should line up with the aesthetics of the game. Like, and obviously once that not it's not just visuals though. I'm as translator copywriter, like I'm very interested in the words on the page, but like make sure you get that like first impression has to be as perfect as you can get it, and like sit down and take the time for that. This isn't regular content. This is content that shouldn't be changed that often. Obviously, you start with the homepage, then you said the about you page, that kind of stuff. Again, sit down and take the time for that because that shouldn't really change that much over time.
No.
So all this kind of permanent content has to be good. Like obviously, like regular updates don't need to be Shakespeare. They need to be like well written and readable, but you don't necessarily need to spend weeks putting together a blog because you've updated one menu item or something like that. You know, if you are shy on time, then you need to prioritize. That's the key to getting the content. Getting your content right is about working out how much time to spend on each of the things you're making, because we're working in a world where you won't have infinite time and infinite resources. So if you do have to prioritize, prioritize the stuff that people are going to see a lot of. So obviously the homepage, the kind of permanent pages, you can at a certain point if your blog's been going for a while, someone's not going to scroll back 3 months and read one of your posts. However, everyone will land on your homepage. Everyone might read the About Us. Not everyone will read the About Us page, obviously, but more people will read that than random blog post from 3 years ago.
Make sure as well that you're producing content that resonates with, as you've said, if you're struggling with time, you're not going to be able to write about everything. So make sure you are prioritizing the stuff that performs best, that resonates most with your audience. So yeah, you might be really excited about that new feature that you've just added to the platform, but the last time you produced a post that took you a week to write about the latest feature, it got no clicks, no one cared. But when you did that 10-second GIF of the combat of your game, and that got shared 100 times on Twitter, then that's the stuff you need to be prioritizing,
Well, that's
especially if
exactly
you're
it. It's
struggling
working
time.
smart, isn't it? You a lot of marketing, and I say this to most devs. It's like an iterative process. Like you'll
Yeah,
start, you'll learn, but you've got to learn. Like this is excuse me, it's the beer kicking in. This is where you've got to learn from what you do, and like you can't put a price on like data and feedback on these kind of things. When you can see what is working, make sure that you can see what is working. Make sure that you're checking regularly what is working. All of these platforms have means for you to check this. Analytics. You can check engagement on all your socials. You can check hits, clicks, behaviors. All of this. Sit down, have a look at it, see where people are coming from, see what they're doing. On your website, see where they're coming from, see what they're doing on the website, and this can allow you to change the layout of the website if you've got something that needs highlighted. If they're not seeing the main selling point of your game, then that needs to be somewhere where they'll see it. Especially if you've found lots of engagement on social for that like the USP, I guess, if you want to call it that. But any kind
yeah,
of key aspect of your game that will cause it to sell, that gets people engaged, that gets people interested, which is the reason why people are going from your top of funnel content to find out more about the game. That needs to be highlighted. That needs to be in places where they can see it and further engage with it. So constantly keep going back over what you've done. Go through, it's not the most fun part of marketing. The fun part is like sharing stuff, but sometimes you share stuff, it doesn't work. You share the stuff, it does work. Find out what works. And obviously, this comes with a lot of resistance from some devs who obviously they're making a game, they want to make their game, and they want to highlight the aspects that they think are cool. And there's always this kind of, you know, inner conflict where they want to show off the thing they think is cool, but the community is engaging with another aspect of it. And rather than going with it and going, oh, well, if the people like that, then I can highlight that. We're not saying change your game, but just change what aspects you highlight of it, because if that's what the people who are going to buy it, the customer is always right. If they think that's cool, show them that. Don't fight against them. They are the you don't have to bend over backwards and change the entire game. Like you mightn't even need to change any aspect of the game. If that gets them through the door, they might discover the thing you think's really cool once they played it. But if there's a different aspect that's selling it, marketing is about leaning into what works to works to sell a product. Obviously, not by lying. I'm not saying like just go, hey, I'll pretend all this is in my game, and then it's completely different. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is your messaging has to reflect what the consumer wants, not what you want. And we've said this about socials as well. Like you need to be on the platforms that the people who want to buy your game are on, not necessarily the platforms that you prefer or like.
yeah. Your customers will tell you what they want from you in terms of content, in terms of the game as well. And if you're building a game to try and sell to people, then there's a certain level of compromise there where um, you're going to have to listen to them because they're going to be the ones giving you money in the end. So if it's just purely a passion project, then you can do whatever you want. It doesn't matter, I guess. But if you're trying to make a game for commercial reasons to sell to make money, then you have to listen to your audience. You have to listen to your customers. You have to do it all the time, actually, because they'll be the ones who lead you to producing the content that they like, to sharing on the platforms that they hang out on, to marketing the game in a way that resonates with them.
Well, they're not. The thing is, they're not the customers. They're not making the game, but in a more like literary sense, they are making the game. Like the success or failure of the game hinges not only on the people making it, but it's the people buying it. So
Yeah,
your success is as much a part of the work you put in to make the game as the work you put in to sell the game, and the people who engage with that. Some of your best marketing might come from the early adopters, the people who loved your project from day one, who feel really involved with it, even if they're not making it. If you're kind of building and building the game and sharing everything with them, they'll feel like they're part of that process, even if they're not making it, and will, you know, promote that for you. They'll tell people they know about this game they've seen and how cool it looks.
yeah, exactly. And it's a really good idea as well to take if you're struggling with ideas for, oh, what could we do? What sort of content could we be producing? Then ask those people that have been following you from the beginning. What would you like to see from us? I think that's one of the best ways to find out some of the types of content that can work best with your audience. I mean, they might turn around and go, "Oh, we'd love it if you did a monthly like office hours webinar that we could jump on and ask you questions about what you've been doing over the last month with the game." You might have never thought of that, but all of your biggest fans want you to do that so you can get on a call with them and engage with them, and they can share all this information, and they can be your advocates on social media. And there's loads of different things, loads of really cool things that you can find out from your customers and your audience if you just ask them.
You need to have the way to ask them, though. This might lead into the one of the ways in terms of
Yeah,
marketing that I like to communicate and engage with potential customers, and that's the mailing list. It might sound a bit, I think some people think it's not very cool, the mailing list. I don't know if they have this. Some people have this mentality of like only old people sign up for like newsletters and stuff like that, but you'll find for me it's one of the most like powerful marketing tools because much like the much like socials where you have people follow you or like your page and people choose whether or not they're open to receive the messaging you're willing to send them. The mailing list is slightly different because again, there's not the algorithm at play. Of course, people may have quite full inboxes, so you do have still some work to make sure your messaging gets through to them when it does land their inbox. It's not just sat in their spam folder or it's one of these emails they never open. You do have that work to do, but as a tool for content and getting content out, I think with most platforms to manage mailing lists, you get the kind of data and useful information and insights that by this point, you can have people quite far down the funnel and know where, and you can even know where they are in the funnel based on how they interact with your emailers, with newsletters, with things like that. And by this point, they're not just ex follower. You can the kind of power you have with like a mailing list and how people interact with it can tell you a lot about every person who's on that mailing list. You can see how many times they've interacted. You can see what they you can have them reply to you through the mailing list. You can make sure that you're sending the right messages to the right people. You can do powerful stuff like obviously change the messaging based on who the person is. Even simple things like having a message that has their name in it. It's like very simple stuff. I remember really doing stuff like this in like IT GCSE or whatever. Cheeky bit of mail merge. I don't know if you remember doing a bit of mail merge back in the day when when you'd get like Microsoft Word to fill in people's details from a
yeah,
database. But this is this all this stuff can be done still through emailers, and you know, at this point you can have the content exactly how they like it. It's like, you can work out how often people like to receive updates on your game from you. You can automate a lot of there's a lot of clever stuff where you can do with mailing lists and these like CRM platforms.
Yeah, there is. Email. I think it's a very popular thing for people to say something like email is dead. No one does email anymore. But I don't think anything's ever really dead. It's just when it's done badly, it doesn't work. Anything that's done properly, if it's the right way to communicate with your audience, will have a really massive positive effect. So, email is one of those in particular. I think there are countless numbers of statistics that prove just how effective email is when done right for businesses and selling products, whether you're selling a service or, in this instance, a video game. So, the I guess the other thing about email is it obviously requires more effort than producing um, regular social media content. But with that extra effort comes a lot more potential benefit for your game. Obviously, you've already mentioned it's you own it, so you're not I guess sort of dancing to the whims of the algorithm on social media, or God forbid, one of these days you've built an audience of 10,000 people on Twitter, and then Twitter shuts down, and you've lost that audience, and you've never captured any of their details or anything. Email is so powerful because you own that data. You control when you speak to those people. You control what content they see. You know that when you send that email, if everything's working correctly, that every single one of those people on that list will get that email. So you're speaking to them all. Whereas, say, on social media, you put a tweet out or you share a post on Instagram, someone might not see it in their feed because the algorithm decides not to promote it to them, even if they are following you, even if they are
Yeah.
a fan of yours. So email is definitely one of those things I would massively recommend you look into building a list and a regular email, whether you start off by doing a monthly email, you work your way up if you can, and put the time and effort into to produce something of value. We all get a million emails, so you've got to make sure the one you send is providing value to your reader, whatever that is as well. I can't give that answer, but
Well, ask
again,
them, as you said.
yeah, exactly, your readers will instruct you on what they want to see from you.
You can segment
Um,
them as well. Things like that. You
and
can segment the audience, so you can literally ask them, do they just want the monthly update? Do they want every bit of every little update you do on, like, on development, on bug fixes, on things like, some people are really interested in the minutia. Some people just want massive updates. And even from there, you can create emails that like automatically fill in that content for you. So
yeah,
the recipient who says, I only want big updates, well, you can put together a template where that content will be automatically populated by what they want to see, and the email itself is sort of bespoke and only with the stuff that they've explicitly said they've wanted. Because, like we said with socials, it's the whim of the algorithm. It's kind of just, it's a lot of guesswork, and it's the algorithm that decides what they think is best for the end user. But in the mailing list, you can literally ask them. You can send out. Not everyone does them, but people who are really enthusiastic about what you have to say. If you send out an email asking for, like, mailing preferences, what kind of content they want to see, and you give them lots of options, they can tell you. They can easily check or uncheck what kind of contents they want to see. I mean, you can even ask them, like, when they want to receive their emails, when they like reading them. Any kind of data. Some people might want to read you stuff like on a Friday night, and are like, I don't want any emails during the week because I've got work. You can ask them that. You can segment them into, like, weekend only emailers, weekday emailers, morning emailers, night emailers, people who want big updates, who want small updates, who only want information about, competitions and giveaways, or people who want to, hear about all the patch fixes. It's so insanely powerful. And as you said, Jimmy, the data, all that data is yours. It's not held by Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, and they're not going to make you pay to access it. It's yours. You own it. You can take that. You can take that data. I think almost every CRM even will allow you to download that data. You can download your entire mailing list, and even if you change CRM, you can take that data. You can take that data with you if you decide to go with a different platform because it works better for you. That's yours. You don't lose a mailing list when you change CRM, but you
No.
can lose an entire audience if you decide to go to a different platform. If for some reason you shut down your Facebook page or whatever, you can't
Oh
just
yeah.
go, "Hey everyone, come join me on Twitter now." It's like, no, that's not how it works. You can tell people, direct them that way. You can't promise they'll all come with you though. Some people will just prefer that platform more.
Yeah, they will. And the other thing email shows you as well is you'll be able to find out who your biggest fans are. You can segment all your list by people who've opened every single email, and that'll give you opportunities possibly to speak to those people individually, send them individual emails. You know that they're really intrigued about what's going on with the game. Maybe you can invite them in to some additional way of doing some marketing. I don't know. You could have maybe an ambassador program where you could invite someone in and say, look, from what we see, you're really keen on our game. You really want to find out more. Would love to have you help us spread the word about the game. How can we make that happen? Um, you can uh, do like spotlights on various different people in your list who are opening, every single one of your emails. You'll be able to segment your audience by those that are like how on the level of interest they have in your game, and then tailor messaging to each of those people as well, especially when it comes to launch time. Someone who's opened 1 out of 20 emails, you might just stick them in a series of emails whereby you just email them once a week about the fact that the game's out.
Yeah,
Maybe you give them a discount. Someone who's engaged entirely, you speak to them in a different way. Maybe you have them. Maybe you give them additional insight into what's going on behind the scenes, make them feel more part of it because you've potentially there got someone who could be doing some marketing on your behalf because they're such a big fan of your game. So yeah, email is just it's so much more than just sending an email.
yeah. Well, it's the it's the relationship, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what that's what CRM stands for. It's customer relationship manager. I mean, it's often shorthand for just mailing lists, but you know, there's like you said, there's so much more depth and power to this. And even like you were saying, when you have someone who's opened like every one of your emails, and if you've got, if you've got the right data, there's no reason you can't just send them an email going, "Hey, the game's out, go buy it." I mean, if you send them if you work smart and do things like you said, like offer a discount code or something like that. Well, with a discount code, then you can also line up when that person's bought your game. There's many ways you can do that where you can check that the person who got the email then went on to buy the game. That's the important thing. You don't want to lose people, you know, through the funnel. This is the thing why you want them in, engaging with you, because once you've got them on like a mailing list or something like that, any kind of sign up, any kind of, just a bit of data collection. Once you know who they are and they're no longer like anonymous customer, then you can not only see how your funnel's working, how they're progressing along it, what the kind of typical journey for your customers would be like, but then you can also see that, you know you can line up data across different platforms. So if your email's doing well and your sales aren't, you're going, but everyone on the email did this. Well, with the email you can see whether they actually went whether you even clicked on the link. You can go, oh, I thought, I've got tons of people in my mailing list. Why didn't anyone buy my game? Like, well, no one's clicked on the link, or no one's redeemed that code against your game for a discount or something like that. You can find it. You can find out if your like super fans are doing what you think they would do, whether they're responding to content, whether they're not. Then you can see if with the fans who maybe aren't as engaged, who are rarely opening your emails, you can start to ask questions about, is this working? Is this not? Where is it not working? Then you can target them directly. Only send messaging out to them. Test it. You can do things like A/B testing, and you can say, find out all the like really unengaged people on your mailing list. Send one email to half of them, one to another. See what works better. I mean, a lot of these platforms will do that for you. You can do these kind of smart testing of your content, changing small things, seeing what works, what doesn't, and then you can in the future adjust your messaging to what works rather than wasting your time on what doesn't. And obviously the more effort you put in at the start of this, the more it'll pay dividends further down the line.
Yeah, definitely. And if you treat it as something that requires this, a similar level of effort, if it's going to be done properly, as the effort that you're putting in, not necessarily time, but effort, that you're putting in to actually build the game. If you treat it that way and sort of change the perception of how you see marketing, decide actually, what, if we're going to do this, let's do it properly. Then yeah, it's gonna be far more effective for you further down the line. It's going to feel like all that time you put into it was actually worth doing, when you see the results that it can generate if it's done properly.
And remember that all the effort you put in at the start is the foundation that'll build, that you build all your marketing on. Like in a previous episode, we mentioned like doing your research, getting the information. Like assumptions are dangerous in marketing. I think most products
Yeah,
fail either because they've made assumptions, or if they've done research, the research, or not done research, if they've used research, then that ignores that their audience, that their any potential customers or players or community are not the the audience that was tested in the research they've looked at. You see a lot of people saying, "Oh, this is this, this is that, this is that." It might not be the case for your audience. This is again why email and mailing lists are so powerful, because you can just find that out. You can ask them. You can read blogs. You can listen to us, and we can tell you stuff that like generally works and things you can try and stuff like that. But then you've got to go out and try it and do your research, like your research, not just read someone else's research. Do your research, ask your audience what they want, and then you can effectively act upon it.
yeah,
But you have to put in that groundwork first before you'll ever get anything out of it.
yeah, definitely. That's it. It might not be the most glamorous part of marketing, but it's certainly one of the most important parts of marketing. I know a lot of the times people just want to jump in and start sharing stuff, um, and doing the more fun bits, but the more work you do at the beginning to do your research and build your foundation, the stronger your house is going to be.
Yeah.
Um, so it's worth doing it.
And I think the last thing we've got to touch on is like the very end, the sale, the content for the sale, which is if if you're an indie dev, you're going to be likely digital distribution, so you're going to be on Steam or a platform, or maybe even on a console. But obviously, with these and content scheduling, you don't have many options for you know the content. Like if this was a race, like a marathon, this is the finish line. You can't. It has to be in the same place. You don't get a huge amount of options to regularly change this, regularly update it. It needs to work for everyone. So one, the content needs to be really really good. That's on there, and two, it's not likely to be part of a schedule. This is going to be this is the finish line. It's here. it's done. But if you've done everything else right up to that point, and you've done that, and you've done stuff in your own house, as it were, when we're talking about, be it on your website, through your mailing list, through the stuff you control, then really not a lot of your marketing has to happen on Steam. I think there's or itch or whatever. I see a lot of devs thinking that, like, your Steam page is important. Don't get me wrong. It needs to be well put together. The writing needs to be good. It needs to show off your game in the very best light. But really, if you've done everything else right, then it shouldn't have as much heavy lifting. The final push over the finish line should happen before that. If you've messaged, if you've got the right messaging, and you've got them engaged, and that should just be the click. Buy the game, you're done. They've had all, the touch point should happen with you, not on some third party site that hosts your game.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could. One of the sort of bottom of funnel pieces of content that I think works quite well. I'm going back to email again, but you could come up with a email series that you prep well in advance. Maybe 4 or 5 emails that you decide you're going to put together that are going to act as sales emails.
Mm-hmm.
And you could come up with several of those series to be sent out to people who have interacted in different ways. So someone who's opened every single email, you can send them a different message to someone who has opened a fraction of the emails. But you can prep all that in advance so that when it comes to launch day and you've actually got your game ready to be purchased, you can just add those people into the different funnels and press play, and then that they're going to get those messages and set the triggers to different. You could have, email 1 goes out as soon as you hit play, email 2 follows up in 3 or 4 days, email 3 a week after that, and then email 4 maybe 2 weeks after that. So you can have it set up so that once you press play, that email funnel is doing all the work for you. It's getting in touch with those people on a consistent basis based on how they've interacted with your social media, your content, your website, whatever it is, with relevant messaging to try and generate the sale from them. So that is probably one of the best types of bottom of funnel content. But we have discussed, obviously, content that's designed to turn people from being interested in a game into possibly buying the game, is things also like a trailer, a really good highly polished trailer, a gameplay trailer in particular. So all that sort of stuff should be part of that last messaging, however it is you message those people, whether it's via email, having it set up on your website and easy to find on your website, and also maybe as part of promotional social media posts. So maybe you put a little bit of money behind that type of post because you know that type of post is supposed to generate the purchase. So you can actually see if it's doing its job, because you'll see if anyone clicks it and if anyone then goes and buys the game. So there's different types of content that work better at this point in the funnel, but they don't necessarily have to be different to the other, like on a different platform from the other ones you've used so far. So you can do bottom of funnel content on social media. You can do bottom of funnel content via email or on your website. It's just a different type of stage.
Yeah, you vary the content. I mean, obviously, like you said, with a mailing list, it's easier because you have the data, so you know how engaged someone is and how far along said funnel they are. But that doesn't mean a customer who is right at the bottom of the funnel, potentially ready for a purchase, won't receive the messaging on social, or won't receive the messaging via your website or through the mailing list. People,
Mm-hmm.
while different platforms, have their strengths and weaknesses for different parts of the funnel is the theoretical customer journey, and that exists in each customer's head. Where they are in the funnel is actually without getting a bit, hippy dippy or whatever, it's a state of mind. The position in the funnel is where the customer's thinking relates to how far along they are towards buying said product. All you're doing is trying to match your content messaging with their state of mind and how they feel about the product.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we should leave it there. Just to finish up, I did have a what I consider just a handful of, I guess, like, I mean, not that you can do TLDR with audio, but we're going to anyway. Um, just a couple of tips about scheduling, about content and scheduling it, because we've mentioned multiple times about having the time for it. And my two tips, and feel free to add in if you want them, but I was gonna say the content you put out needs to be as regular as possible as you can manage, because as we said, it's about someone's mindset towards your product, so they need to remember it exists, especially top funnel. Obviously, we mentioned this can get less regular as they get more familiar with the product. They don't need as much reminding if they already know where you are and where to find you, but it needs to be as regular as possible. The more they can be reminded, the more they'll think about your product, which means the more likely they are to buy it. But on the side of the person marketing it, it needs to be sustainable. There's very little point in setting up a schedule that you cannot adhere to. There's It's just a waste of time, because that means you've wasted the time creating all the content for what you think is a very regular schedule that you can no longer maintain, which means if you went out and put together a load of like updates or social media posts and then put them all out in a week and then realized, oh, I can't do this every week, you've literally wasted time on maybe a week's worth of content that you will no longer be able to see the benefit of, because your product will erode in people's minds because they won't hear about it or they won't get the updates. So make sure that your content is as regular as you can make it and sustainable. So make sure you work out what you can manage. And if that means taking time away from developing the game, remember it'll pay dividends in when you release, or just as you're working on it. If you don't market it, it will not sell, and it might, you know, it means that all the time you put into development would technically be wasted if you have commercial ambitions. Of course, if you're doing it for fun, then this doesn't matter. But obviously, if you've stuck with us to this point, then we can imagine you have, you know, commercial ambitions for your game.
Say as well, your audience is pretty savvy as well. They'll notice if your content posting and publishing is all over the place, and people like to know when they're going to hear from other people.
Yeah,
So if you're saying, updates every Wednesday and then you miss a Wednesday, then people will be like, oh, they didn't post this week. What's going on there? You very quickly get forgotten, and people very quickly find you out if you're not picking the schedule that you said you're going to set.
it also
So
reflects badly on them. If at least for me, if I see someone who can't maintain a regular content schedule and hasn't even, it only takes one message to say, oh, by the way, this is happening, content's going to be, even something like that, I'll go, oh yes, I remember they did tell me that they weren't going to make this Wednesday or something like that.
yeah,
But it's very difficult to separate your perception of the person making the game and the final product. And if you become the unreliable poster or whatever, for me, even if I don't actively think it and think the game looks really good, there'll be somewhere in my brain that's going, yeah, but they couldn't stick to a schedule. Does that apply to all the work they're doing? Potentially not, but people do think that. There are people, what you do reflects on your work, even if it's not directly the work you're doing.
yeah, it can have a negative effect. So certainly, as you said, figure out what you can do, what you definitely know you can do, and start there. If you're finding it easy and you think you can do more, then do more. But don't be like, oh, we need to do this content thing. So, right, that's 2 Instagram posts a day, 10 tweets a day. Let's get it going, guys. And then like you do it for 2 days, and then you burnt out after 2 days. You go,
Yeah.
what do you got left? What are we gonna do? Stick with something that's manageable and work your way up from there if you can.
And the last two tips I have are what your content doesn't need to be, and what your content schedule. What I would add is that you don't need earth shattering updates. Not every update needs to blow everyone's mind. People are quite happy with you just touching base and a friendly update. Even in lots of aspects, people are like, yeah, we're working on menus. It's kind of boring, but we're just letting you know that like this project isn't dead. We're still working on it, and we're still thinking about you. And also, it doesn't always need to be 100% the truth. Your updates don't need to bear all. Like I said earlier, like you can build up content to use if it helps you maintain the schedule. Like you get a bit of artistic license with this. Like obviously you can't outright lie to people and say you're doing, you're making something and then the game comes out and it's not at all that. Cyberpunk learnt that the hard way, I think, and No Man's Sky and projects like this that literally lied about their products. You can't lie with people, but everyone will be fine if you offer up an update one week that was technically something you did last week. That it's a bit of movie magic. People will live, they will be fine. They're not sat there fly on the wall as you develop this game. You can play around with the content. It's your content, it's your story. You can, the narrative around this is yours to control. So
Yeah.
if it works and allows you to maintain, the regular and sustainable schedule, then bank some extra content for a later date. Have the stagger the updates so that you're not using everything. If you know you're going to be, even if you know you're going to go on holiday for a week, I mean, you can update people on your holiday if you want. But if you know you're going to miss a few days and work's going to be slow, then save up some of that content from when you were working quickly and super productive and when you weren't sitting on the beach enjoying yourself. It's fine. Don't be like, oh, I haven't done anything this week, so I'll not make an update, or I'll not provide the content I said I would because I've got nothing to say. If you've been smart about it and you didn't say everything in the last update, use some of the leftover updates from that update. It'll be fine.
Yeah, no one's gonna pull you on that. The last thing I would say is just publish your content as well. There's loads of people, create it and then worry about what people are going to say and how
Yeah.
people are going to react to it. No one out there is going to react as poorly as you think they're going to in your head. So the first step, and it gets so much easier after you've done it the first time, is to just put it out there. Just start doing it. You'll see it's actually a very positive experience and not a negative one. Don't worry so much about it.
And
Get
also
your
then,
content out there, start sharing it with your audience, and start building more of an audience.
well, that's it. And the people who are going to react negatively are not the people you're trying to target with this content anyway. The kind of people who waste their time reacting negatively to certain things, with particularly those who react negatively with like no constructive feedback.
Yeah.
Those are not the people who are going to buy your game when it comes out. The people who are going to just like shit all over your ideas and stuff like that. These are not potential customers. These are
These are just the
sad, lonely
internet
idiots.
people, unfortunately.
These are
Yeah.
just people online. Yeah, people online who, in all likelihood, are probably not making something themselves and are probably far too scared to put something that they made up online for fear of people reacting the way they do to it. So remember, the positive reactions you get to the content you're posting are the people you want to be talking to. This isn't like an echo chamber issue. This is people who like your stuff, which means they are more likely to buy it when it's finished or when it's available.
Yeah, definitely. And to be honest as well, you're probably not even going to come across people being negative anyway. I mean, it's just one of those things that people, the fear of it is far worse than the reality of it. So just get it out there. Don't sort of be in your own head too much about it. Start sharing stuff. People will find it interesting because people find there's an audience out there for everything.
Yeah.
So just get your content out there, and as soon as you start publishing the first few times, you'll see how easy it is, and how much fun it can be as well to start engaging with people that are genuinely interested in what you're doing.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, there's not much else to say on it. Like with content, it has to be regular. It has to be out there. People need to hear about your game if you want it to sell. And once you know once you understand the funnel, and once you have everything you need to start putting content out there, that's when you can start marketing and putting out the kind of content we've just been talking about this evening, and remembering that people are people and they forget, so make sure it's regular. And I don't think I have anything else to add to that.
Oh,
I
we've covered it at a sort of a basic level pretty well.
Yeah, obviously learn from, like we said, learn from what you do. Try things, see what works, see what doesn't. It's a learning process, and and that's not just for people who are new to marketing. Marketing is always a learning process, because you're not necessarily learning about the marketing, you're learning about the audience, you're learning about the consumers. So for every product, those are technically different people. There might be some overlap, but as they're different and new people, you need to learn about them and what it's more about what makes them tick and what they respond to than what's been done before. You can start with the knowledge that we've imparted here, but then you have to use it to learn what works for your audience.
Yep, that's it. Take it and go do some research.
Yep. And with that, I guess we'll just thank you for watching and or listening, depending on what your platform of choice is. And just add that if you want to find out more about us and get more content on indie games, we have our website, indiebandits.com. You can engage with us on the socials. We do love them. We have our Discord channel, which you can find links to on the website or via our socials. And if you appreciate what we do enough to open your wallet, we are available on Patreon and Ko-Fi. Just both those websites /Indie Bandits, where you can either just donate to us out of the kindness of your heart, but we wouldn't be that cruel if you want something out of it. We have some very nice tiers for indie devs to enjoy some help from us, or there are commissions on Ko-Fi if you're not necessarily able to support us on a regular basis. There's some nice stuff on there that we can do for you with a one-off payment. And obviously, if you're listening to this on podcast, you can subscribe, you can leave us a review, or even if you don't want your review to be public, go tell some friends. Just tell some people you know that this is quite useful, especially if you have some fellow indie devs that might benefit from this. Just let them know. YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. You know what to do. It's the internet. And I guess we'll leave it at that. We'll say it's goodbye from me, Joe.
Goodbye from me, Jimmy.
See you next time. Or here he is.
Bye bye.
Drop.
Bye bye.